Welcome to the Skins in the Berg podcast. The Skins in the Berg podcast, the best source for Commanders commentary in the Carolinas and beyond. I'm your host, LG. I want to first and foremost thank everyone for tuning in. But today we're going to have a preview of the Commanders' last game of the season. That's right, the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Washington Commanders. And I know when the NFL schedule makers, when they put this one together, they probably had their Birdman hands. You know, they was proud of this Week 18 matchup, which they probably thought was going to either decide the NFC East division or even, the number one seed in the NFC East overall. They probably didn't think we'd be in this position. Maybe at worst, some minor playoff seed implications, but the injury gods, they had a different idea. We just had injury after injury to the Commanders, and that pretty much turned this thing into a meaningless game where pretty much is turned into the please don't get hurt bowl. I know if you're a Commanders fan, you don't want any of our guys getting hurt going into the offseason. You don't want them having to go into the offseason rehab, and we want them getting better at football. You don't want them, going into it with a major injury that they got to rehab from and becomes a nagging thing going into the next season. And if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I'm sure you don't want any of your guys getting hurt going into the playoffs. So it's pretty much the most important outcome for this one is that nobody gets hurt. But we're going to preview it anyway, and I'm going to tell you what I think should happen versus what I think will happen. Pretty much I'm calling this one right here the no, I insist game. That's right, the no, I insist game. All right. You ever, going into the mall or a public place and you and someone else, whether it's a stranger or even somebody you're arriving at the same point at the same time, whether it's a line at the grocery store or a door that you're entering the building in, you arrive at the same time. And, guys, you probably say, after you, and then that person, goes, trying to be polite, say, no, after you. And then you say, oh, no, I insist. Please, after you. All right. That's what I call this game right here, the no, I insist game. No, I insist. In other words, watch the Commanders. We need to tell the Philadelphia Eagles, you know what? No, I insist. Please have this victory. Dan Quinn, he's been quoted this week as talking to the players, trying to tell them how important this game is as far as wins and losses. I, too, think this game is important, but not from a wins and losses standpoint. We agree on why, but I think it's important for one reason and one reason only. I think this is going to be the first major test for Adam Peters, the Washington Commanders general manager. All right. This is where we find out who Adam Peters is. All right. Because a GM that's worth those millions is going to have to go in and step in and say to Dan, I'm sorry, Dan, we're not playing any starters, no starters this week. And we need to use this week to work on some things. Wink, wink. Wink, wink. All right. He need to go in that office and go ahead and exert his will on this game right here and hand this game to the Philadelphia Eagles. He has to put this team in the best possible draft position versus winning a meaningless game that even your opponent doesn't care anything about. And that's why it's the no, I insist game. Because we're going to go in and hopefully go in as an organization and not strive to win this game. The Eagles are going to go in with a playoff future and not want anybody to get hurt, so they're not going to play any of their starters. So they're going to say, no, after you. And then we need to follow that up with, no, I insist. I insist. We need to find out if Adam Peters is playing checkers or playing chess as the lead football mind in this organization. All right. He needs to hand this game to the Philadelphia Eagles. And please don't take my word for it. Don't just take my word for it. All right. There's a team that was in this exact same position years ago. All right. There's only one executive in the league right now that's carrying that genius title. One executive carrying that genius title. That man's name is Howie Roseman. None other than the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman. Considered a genius. How and when did he get that title? I'll tell you when. Because prior to 2020, prior to that 2020 season, Howie Roseman was considered a pretty good GM. Pretty good GM. Right? Not this genius that everybody talks about now. He was pretty good. They did have a Super Bowl. He always kind of kept the Eagles in contention. All right. He's pretty good. But in 2020, more specifically, January 2021, that's when his status elevated to the genius title. That's when he became a genius. All right. And what made it a genius move that he pulled in January of 2021 was its results in years to come. What made it genius was what happened as a result of him making that move. Because at the time, no one was calling him a genius when he made the decision that he made. It came with high levels of criticism. Let's review. The Eagles were out of the playoffs. All right. They were out of the playoffs. Their record was such that their season was over. And they were about to play a divisional opponent who needed the game to win the division. If you remember, the Washington football team at the time they were called, they came into that game playing the Philadelphia Eagles, needing to win that game to win the division and make it to the playoffs and continue their season. So the game was important to the Eagles' opponent. The game was important to the New York Giants, who would have won the division had not the Washington football team won that day. But Howie Roseman, he said, you know what? Jalen Hurts is a guy that's going to be good enough to win this whole thing if we give him the tools. If we give Jalen Hurts the tools to win, we can win this whole thing. So let me do everything possible to get him those tools so that he can win this whole thing. I'm going to do everything in my power to get him the tools to win the whole thing. If that means getting to a better draft position so he's better equipped to win the whole thing, then that's what we're going to do. To the point where in the fourth quarter of that game, a game that decided the division championship, he decided to bench his QB and play third string Nate Sudfeld. You remember that? They played third string Nate Sudfeld in the fourth quarter of a game that they were definitely about to win. And ultimately, they lost that game. They lost that game. That's the decision that the GM made. Get Hurts out of there, get Nate Sudfeld in. And they lost that game. And what happened? What happened? What happened was that put them in a high enough draft position to be able to trade up 2 spots and get Devontae Smith and have a top 10 pick in each of the following rounds, setting them up for an influx of talent. Now, it's a fact that they did have a QB sitting on the bench that another team was willing to give up a couple of rounds of draft choices for, including the first rounder. Remember, they traded Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts and ended up getting a first rounder for him along with some other picks. That jump-started them into having the best roster in the league. But make no mistake about it, when the man that everybody calls a genius was faced with the same decision that we're faced with now, you see what he chose, and you see what the results were. We need to make that same decision. We need to make that same decision. Adam Peters needs to make that same decision. All right. I tell you what, you want to mess around and find out that every game is not about a win or a loss the hard way. All right. If you remember Gerard Mayo, former head coach of the New England Patriots, he won his last game. Yeah, he won his last game. All right. Cost his team several draft positions in the process. And Mayo was KO'd by Monday. Adam Peters, please don't let a coach that may not even matter in a couple of years decide our fate in a meaningless game. Call that dude to your office and say, Dan, this is how this is going to go. This is going to be the no, I insist game. You don't want this first down? Oh, no, I insist. You don't want this touchdown? Oh, no, please, I insist. That's what you've been doing all season anyway. Every third down, every fourth down. Oh, no, I insist, please. Have it. Why stop now? Why stop now? We need to continue the no I insist defense, lose this game, and position ourselves. We can be as high as the number 2 draft pick. You know how that could set us up in years to come? We need to tell the Philadelphia Eagles, no, I insist. So my preview, what I think going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what I prefer to happen. All right, I prefer us to come out and get slapped around out the gate. Let's not even make it a game. Let's come out in the first quarter and get slapped around out the gate. Let's not even make it a game. That's what we've been doing for most of these joints this season anyway. Most of these joints this season, we've been coming out getting slapped anyway. So let's come out, get slapped around. Let's not even make it a game. Let's get out there early and position ourselves to be in the highest draft position as possible. All right. Now, what do I think will happen? Well, knowing us, we'll probably win 17-12 and get the number 7 pick in the draft.